Hey guys, so I've been playing some Nexus Squadron Strike, and it's quite a cool new arcade map. You can see it took me about 5 games to figure it out, and since then I've won 9 in a row, with the exception of leaving a game immediately. And I'd like to take you through basically how to win at it and what it is. So first thing worth mentioning, when you go to join, you actually get to pick the matchup type, which is a cool new feature I didn't know about. And second cool thing that I didn't know about is you get to pick your mode. So I didn't know they could actually allow you to change things within the lobby. So let's go look at some replays. In this cool new map, it's basically like Colonial Line Wars on a map that looks like Nexus Wars. And it has a lot more cool statistics than either of those two maps had. So you can bring up the stats over here, and everyone gets $60 every 30 seconds, plus they get a little bit of money for killing people. It's important to note that I'm playing with people I don't know against people that I don't know who don't know each other. So basically, the way that I won 9 games in a row is by telling people what to do. And you may feel kind of like a dick doing that, but most people playing are going to be playing for the very first time, or maybe even the third time, but nobody's ever told them what to do, and they've never looked into it too deeply on their own. So you can do really well just by telling everybody what to do. So there are 3 general rules, and if you tell your team these 3 rules, you should be able to win pretty easily. The first rule is that it is much more important, especially in the early game, to have a higher income than your opponents, and it is not important at all to hold the lane. The bonus for holding the lane, whether it's 1 lane or 3 lanes, or 3 lanes with a cross, or 2 lanes with a cross, or any of the modes, the bonus is still just 10%. So holding the lane almost doesn't matter at all, because your very first income upgrade is going to give you a plus 10% boost to income. The second thing to note is that you should basically specialize in things with 6 or more range. So Stalkers have 6 range, so they're pretty good. Hydras are pretty good because they have 6 range. Marauders are pretty good because they have 6 range. But none of those things are nearly as good as the Reaper, because all 3 of the ones that I just mentioned are 2 supply, 6 range, whereas the Reaper is just a single supply and 6 range. And its upgrades are more efficient, and it fires 2 shots per attack. So basically, there's no reason for anyone ever to make anything other than Reapers in the very, very beginning of the game. So you should be able to quickly get to the top of the kill list just by going income, income, Reaper, Reaper. Vultures are actually also quite good because, again, they're 6 range and they have a bunch of hit points and stuff like that. And the third rule is that as soon as Tier 3 is available, having 9 range things is really important. So Lurkers, for example, are the best Tier 2 unit in the game because they have 9 range, and they're the only Tier 2 unit that has 9 range. So you really want to be starting off with some Reapers, and then getting some Lurkers, and then adding siege tanks or battle cruisers with Yamato cannon, or Spectres with Lash. Anything that can be casted from very far away, because there are a lot of really powerful short-range things. But if you have a lot of really powerful long-range things, those short-range things will be dead before they get to shoot. So that, kind of sucks for them. Anyway, let's look at what this game is all about. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Mostly it's about income. Your units walk across the field and kill stuff. In this specific game, one of my allies named Good Luck was just upgrading a Zergling. So each of these towers can be individually upgraded. And usually the general rule is that when you build a tower, it's very efficient to upgrade it, because you're going to get plus 20% damage for 7 minerals, like for practically free. So why wouldn't you do that? But the more upgrades you put into it, the less efficient they are, because upgrades are linear rather than feeding upon each other. So at a certain point, upgrading things is no longer very helpful. Also, as a general rule, armor upgrades are not very useful, because the counter to armor upgrades in StarCraft in general is to have high damage per shot. And it's so common for people to go Medevac Hellbat and some other combination of high armor and healing, that most people who play the game for the second time or third time or whatever are going to get big, heavy damage dealing units like this Stalker, who does 14 plus 8 damage per shot, or my Reaper, which does 16.2 plus 9 damage per shot. And at that point, the armor is just not worth it, because to get 15 armor, you have to spend like 400 minerals or something, and even then, I can just upgrade my attack a couple of times and hit through it. So avoid tanky units, avoid armory units. There's sentries, caster units, right? So most caster units start with like 50 energy and a couple of spells on autocast. But they usually won't cast any of their spells because starting with 50 energy, they just don't have enough energy for it. So it's important to upgrade the energy on your casters just high enough so that they can cast the spells that you want them to do, and not upgrade it any higher than that. Also, don't get plus attack or plus armor on your casters. That's crazy. Most importantly, like I said, with any team game, the most important thing is getting your team to do well. So you notice my team is falling behind on income with the enemy's team, so I keep talking to Good Luck, this guy who's not upgrading his income, about how he should upgrade his income. And the biggest tool you have to getting other people to do what you want is the resource sharing menu. If you give them lots of money and you say, can you please use this money for this purpose, then it doesn't interrupt what they want to be doing with the game. You know, so if you say, I would like you to upgrade your income, here is some money to do that with, you're much more likely to convince your teammates that upgrading income is a good idea. Right? So, like, for example, right now we don't hold the lane, and nothing we do is going to get us the lane if we just keep spamming units. And even if we spam units and get the right combination of units and do get the lane, we're going to be fighting against a team that has 400 bucks every 30 seconds, and we would have 60 bucks times 4 every 30 seconds. And it wouldn't matter that we got the middle beacon, which gives us 10%. It's much more important to have a big income. Also, you got to realize your Nexus by itself is strong enough to hold off basically everything. You can go no units whatsoever for several rounds and do just fine, because they can't kill your Nexus until much later in the game. So that said, you're better off as a team just focusing exclusively on income until you see what units your opponents are throwing at you, and then trying to counter those units. So you can see on their team, all of their money right here is going to the guy who made a Hydralisk, the guy who made a unit that has 6 range. And on our team, all of our money is going to me, the guy who made a Marauder and a Reaper that have 6 range, and to Pav McGee, the guy who made, again, a ranged unit and upgraded attack. Anyway, in the much later game, things become quite different. But the general theory is, when in doubt, find something with 9 range and put money into it. Simple. And as long as your team has more income than your opponent's team, it almost doesn't matter what anyone does. You got to have a strong beginning foundation, and then from there you just kind of win no matter what happens. Really good things for mid game. Sentries. I began to talk about casters and then stopped it. So I finally convinced this dude to sack his Ling and go for lurkers. Lurkers are the 9 range. I was talking about how great they are and how I wanted him to upgrade income and I wanted him to make lurkers. And he's like, here's some cash. Select your probe and hit E. Anyway. Yeah, sentries. If you get a sentry, he's going to cast Guardian Shield. That's reasonable in the early game, but he's going to die pretty quick and it's not very useful. If you get a sentry and you upgrade his energy 20 times and then you research Hallucination, he's going to summon 4 Colossus or 4 Immortals or 4 Archons, and they're going to tank for you, and that's just, it's like $1,000 to get 4 Archons divided by half hit points worth of tanking, which is a huge deal. So that's something that you should do almost every game. If you're forced to spend money on tanking, you want to avoid spending money on tanking like the plague. If your allies spend money on tanking, then you don't have to, so that's great. But if nobody wants to tank, then start tanking with a sentry. It's the right way to go about things, man. And finally, late game, once you've upgraded your income 1,000,000 times and you just have tons of money, start feeding money to whoever has the lowest income, because it's much more efficient for them to be upgrading their income than for you to keep upgrading your own. And late game, you want basically ultras and queens. Queens heal ultras, ultras tank everything, and you win. So let's look at some other things, man. Let me stop this. Rules that I forgot to mention. One of the biggest ones: always thank people when they do something that helps the team but doesn't help them personally. If somebody makes a tanking unit, say thank you for making that tanking unit and give them money. If somebody makes an observer, say thank you for making the observer and give them some money. You want your allies to be happy that you're on your team, so that when you tell them not to do stupid things, they'll listen to you. Manipulative, yet awesome. Always be polite. Another thing, we're going to take a look at ratio of cost versus value. It's really important to basically never spend more than $1,000 on any tower, because the main goal of each tower is to have a good cost versus ratio. So, for example, these lurkers, like I said, the lurkers are like the best unit in the game because of that 9 range, especially early on, like it is now. So you can see they're doing $4,000, but you spent $1,000 on them, so it's a 4-to-1 ratio. This one's $2,000 for 10,000 damage, so again, kind of a 4 to 5 to 1 ratio. This Reaper, less than $1,000, did 13,000 bucks of damage, so it's 13 to 1, more like 15, 16, 17 to 1 ratio. Much cooler. You're going to see a lot of people who, when they very first try out the game, they're going to build one tower and upgrade the heck out of it, and that'll almost never pay off as far as efficiency. Also, look at this tower. This guy spent $1,000 on the tower, and it's nowhere near $1,000 in damage. I mean, it's not as old as some of the other towers, so it makes sense that it hasn't done a ton of damage, but the bigger deal is that this Stone Zealot is a tanking unit. So he's investing money to make everybody else's towers better, but he doesn't personally get money for it because he's not killing anything. So this is the type of example where you'd want to give him some money and say thank you for upgrading your Stone Zealot. These infestors, if they have this energy upgrade, right? If they have no energy upgrades, they're going to neural parasite one unit. The neural parasite's going to run out, and then they're going to be useless for the rest of the fight. If you upgrade their energy high enough, they're going to neural parasite something, and then fungal something, and then fungal something else, and then neural parasite something else, and then fungal something else, and it's much better. Also, you might want to not even get neural parasite for some of your infestors, like get one with neural and one without, because in examples like this, it's cool. You just neuraled something that the guy upgraded to level 15 in all categories, and that's great. But a lot of the times, you'll neural something useless, like whatever happens to be in front, and that's just kind of a waste. And you want to be casting a lot of fungal growth, because fungal growth is awesome. These specters, really important. Basically, the longer the game goes, the more cost-effective specters are going to be. Once you get this upgrade, Psionic Lash. So what Psionic Lash does, it's a spell, like Snipe, so it ignores armor. And having a spell that ignores armor means that if your opponents are spending huge amounts of money upgrading one specific unit, and you basically insta-snipe that thing, then that just means all of their money was wasted. So, for example, these guys really heavily upgraded that Hydra. So when my Spectres come along, they're going to snipe that Hydra, and this guy is probably worth, like, I don't know, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, and he's just going to die as soon as my Spectres get in range of him, just like, dies. So people upgrade their armor 15 times, and then you cast a spell on them that ignores armor, and that's just awesome. So basically every game I always want at least 5 Spectres, and as the game goes on, they're going to pay for themselves more and more. You can see that I built them like 3 rounds ago, and they're already 3-to-1 ratio. By the end of the game, they're often 16-to-1 or 20-to-1 ratio of damage versus cost. So really get going on your Spectres as soon as you have the cash. Another unit that will always pay for himself is this Goliath, because he has 9 range versus air and 7 range versus ground. And anything with really long range that can do a lot of damage is always quite good. This guy's kind of upgrading it in a weird way, but Yar. So it's a little bit deeper into this same game. You can see that I've caught up and I'm now way ahead on damage done. And during the early and mid game, I basically set up my Reaper and my Marauder and then fed all my money to Good Luck to try to bribe him into doing smart, intelligent things. And then once he did decide to switch over to Lurkers, now there's no point in me spending a bunch of money to tech to Lurkers myself. Instead, I just keep upgrading my income and feeding all my excess money to him so that he can upgrade his Lurkers, because Lurkers are the unit that I want to be on my team. So again, it's a team game. If somebody builds the thing that you want to have, just give them money and tell them to upgrade it. Really cool. So he pulled way ahead of everybody on damage done because those Lurkers were kicking butt, but now I'm pulling further and further ahead each round because, like I said, this Spectre Lash is amazing. Then he went for these tanking units, and Ultras are terrible without Queens, so he got some Ultras, and therefore I put some Queens next to them and upgraded their healing. And again, Queens aren't going to kill anything, they're just going to heal the Ultras, so this is wasted money for me, but for the team it's helpful, and you know, take one for the team. That's how you win team games, man. That's how you win team games. So cash for plus HP to ultras. Here you go. Give him money and tell him what you want him to spend it on. That kind of thing. Carriers are almost never worthwhile. We can go over here and click the little carrier thing and see how it worked out. See, it cost 6k and did 6k of damage. It cost 2k and did 1k of damage. Carriers and Stone Zealots tend not to pay for themselves. Thor's, on the other hand, he spent 11k on it and it did 11k damage, so it's still a 1-to-1 ratio, but that's just because he's dumping every penny he gets into upgrading the Thor. Like, he's still actively upgrading. Thors with their 7 range versus ground and 9 range versus air are pretty commonly huge damage dealers that do a lot of the damage of your team. And this is close to the end. There's some nukes that are going to go down and stuff, but once you've gotten this high of an income relative to your opponents, that's kind of the end of the universe. End of the universe as we know it. Here's some more cash for the ultras. Good job, guys. The latest game. I opened the game by explaining again the 3 general rules, and this rooster guy was being a dick about it, and so Keblicious left. He's like, I don't want to play with some dick. So it's a 3-on-4, and when you're doing 3-on-4, normally in a 4-on-4, you just want to personally try to keep your income around the highest level of your opponent's income and donate money to your teammates so that they can keep their income up, and just generally your team wants to have more money than the opposing team. And the same thing is true in a 3-on-4. It's just that each of you individually has to have a much higher income in order for your team to have higher income than your opponent's team. So, for example, they have like 550 right now, and we've got like 590 right now. So it's a lot closer than it looks with individual players having 220 and stuff. So again, you can see I'm just dominating on damage done because it's all about the Reapers in the early game and then all about the Lurkers in the mid game. So I started with Reapers, added Lurkers, and then added Spectres. Medevac over here to heal my friendly allies dudes. Lurker over here. This kind of stuff. And that is the roots of the moots. So 2 more things worth mentioning. You notice. Let's go through all the players. You notice how I've got 22 supply and everyone else has 15 or 6 or not very many. It's always a lot better to have, I guess I did already say this, always a lot better to have 22 guys that each have a 1,000 value than having 10 guys that have a 2,000 value or something like that. Again, feeding him money, and he's confused as to why. I'm like, well, you don't have any income, so of course I'm feeding you money. It's tempting at the beginning of the game if somebody is rude to you and just being a dick about things to be rude back, but remember, it's a team game, and all they have to do is not play very well, and it ruins your experience. So what I do is I block them, and then I'm really nice, and I can't hear what they're saying back, so I just assume that they're being nice back, and that seems to work quite well. Final note, man, what was the thing that I wanted? Oh yeah, Archons. So it's a lot of times your opponent is going to get air units when you don't have any air units. So you have a lot of units like Reapers that are walking around that will, once everything on the ground is dead, they'll just keep moving, and the air units will stop the Stalkers. So the Reapers will end up in front, the Stalkers will end up behind, and it screws up your whole force. So one thing you can do about that is by putting Archons in front. They have only 3 range, a really short range, so if you put multiple Archons in front of your longer ranged guys, then they're going to stop and fight the air units really quickly, and either they're going to be able to kill the air units before your army gets too spread out, or they're going to block your longer ranged units in the back from getting ahead of them, and that allows your army to stay a lot more clumped up. So if your opponent is going pretty heavy on the air units, it's nice to add an Archon as a tanking thing. And when you do add an Archon as a tank, again, hallucinations can go really well with that, because your sentry will hallucinate a bunch of other Archons, and then they won't know which one to hit, kind of thing, and good times. Corruptors and Phoenixes don't seem to be very good anti-air. Much better anti-air seems to be Vikings or Goliaths especially, and Thors do quite well as well. And I like Thors especially because they're good ground to ground as well. Templars are worth discussing. You know how before I said fungal growth can be quite handy, especially because Lurkers have a 9 range and they're cloaked. So in order to get close enough to detect the lurkers, your detectors usually end up getting killed by other things that like have 9 range anti-air or Vikings or stuff like that. So it can be kind of troublesome when you're facing somebody who's massing lurkers when you don't have enough of your own lurkers to fight back. So one thing you can do is get infestors that don't have neural parasites, so they only fungal growth, and they'll fungal the lurkers, and lurkers don't have very much hit points, so they'll just very many hit points, I should say. So they'll just die to several fungals. And High Templar are worth mentioning, right? Feedback is crazy good. It's important to have feedback against things like Thors that'll have maxed out energy but not be using it for anything, and you can just feedback them. But you got to take everything with a grain of salt, because you're not just saying is feedback good or bad. You have to compare feedback and Psystorm in damage done versus something like a Spectre that's just going to be ignoring armor and nuking. So for $1,400 you get a $20,000 worth of damage on this Spectre, whereas with the High Templar it's $4,000 for 3,000 damage. So this is somewhat like an 8-to-1 ratio, whereas this is more like a 14-to-1 ratio. So it's good to make one High Templar, but you don't really want to spam them, and you can do without them a lot more easily than you can do without Spectres. Yeah. It's so deceiving too, because High Templars, they look like they're so awesome, man, but they storm your own troops a lot, and they do a lot of damage, and they are good, and you should get a caster, but the question isn't whether or not you should get a caster, it's whether you should get High Templar versus Spectre versus Fungal. And I would definitely say that Spectre is the best, High Templar is second best, and Fungal is the worst, so you should only get Fungal once you already have the other two. And I really like how you can just spam Spectres, man. You can just get tons of them, because they don't overlap. They're not the way Storms do. You know, if you get 1,000,000 High Templars, it's just kind of a waste. But if you get 1,000,000 Spectres, each one of them is nuking someone.